James Van crouched beside the coffee table, his weathered hand steady as he helped Mary color the stegosaurus. The 6-year-old gripped her green crayon like it might escape, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Uncle James, do you think dinosaurs got scared?" she asked, not looking up from her drawing. "Probably. Everything gets scared sometimes." He watched her small fingers work. 3 years of avoiding his brother's house. 3 years of keeping his distance from Kendra. And here he was babysitting because she'd called in a panic about some emergency at work. Mary nodded seriously. "I get scared." "What scares you?" She shrugged, still coloring. "Dark places. Loud noises. When people yell." James set down his own crayon. In his wilderness survival classes, he taught people to read signs, broken branches, disturbed soil, tracks that didn't belong. Right now, something felt off. Mary hadn't looked him in the eye once since he'd arrived 2 hours ago. "How about some soup?" he asked, standing up. His knees cracked. Too many years of military training and hiking through Oregon forests. In the kitchen, he opened a can of tomato soup while Mary arranged her crayons in perfect lines. The house felt wrong. Too clean, too quiet. Dell's house had always been chaos, sports magazines everywhere, dishes in the sink, Mary's toys scattered like confetti. Now everything looked like a magazine photo. "Where are all your toys?" James called out. "Mommy put them away." She said, "I'm too messy." James stirred the soup. 6-year-olds were supposed to be messy. Dell had complained about stepping on Legos every morning. He'd loved it. They ate in the living room, Mary perched on the edge of the couch like she might need to run. James told her about the family of raccoons he'd seen that morning, how the babies followed their mother in a perfect line. Like ducks. Exactly like ducks. For the first time all evening, Mary smiled. It didn't last. "Want to build a fort?" James asked, finishing his soup that Mary's eyes lit up. "Really? With the blankets?" "Best kind of fort." They dragged blankets off beds and chairs, using kitchen chairs as supports. Mary crawled inside first, giggling as James made the walls collapse and rebuilt them. Inside their fabric cave, she finally seemed like the kid he remembered from before Dell died. "This is safe," she whispered, touching the blanket walls. "Very safe. Nothing can get in unless we let it." They played for another hour. Mary built roads for her remaining toy cars while James fixed the fort walls. She talked about her teacher, Miss Creel, about a boy named Tommy who shared his cookies, about a dog she wanted to adopt. Normal kid stuff. Almost at 8:30, James checked his watch. "Time to go home, kiddo." Mary froze. The toy car slipped from her fingers. "Can't I stay here? Please. Your mom's expecting you back." "But I like it here. It's quiet." James studied her face. She'd gone pale, her small hands clenched in her lap. "Mary, what's wrong?" She shook her head quickly. Too quickly. "Hey." He kept his voice gentle. In the army, he'd learned that scared people, soldiers, or kids needed calm voices. "Talk to me." Mary looked around the fort like someone might be listening. Then she scooted closer to James, close enough that he could smell her strawberry shampoo. "Uncle James." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yeah, I don't want to go home." "Why not?" Mary's bottom lip trembled. She looked at the fort entrance, then back at James. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to lean in to hear. "Because Mommy hurts me, and she said I'll end up like Daddy if I talk." The words hit James like ice water. He sat perfectly still, every muscle in his body tense. In combat, he learned not to react immediately. Quick movements scare informants, made them shut down. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Mary's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not supposed to tell. You could tell me anything. I'm your uncle." "But Mommy said." "I don't care what Mommy said." James kept his voice steady. "You're safe with me. Always." Mary wiped her nose with her sleeve. "She gets really mad. And she pushes me. Hard. And she locks me in the closet when I cry." James's jaw clenched. He forced his hands to stay relaxed. "How often?" "Lots. Especially at night." "And Dennis, Mary started crying. "Who's Dennis?" "Mommy's friend. He touches me weird. Mommy says I'm making it up." James felt something cold and sharp settle in his stomach. Dennis. He'd seen a man leaving Kendra's house last week when he'd driven by. Tall guy, expensive car. "Mary, look at me." She raised her wet eyes. "You're not making anything up, and you're not going home tonight." James called Kendra from his truck while Mary dozed in the passenger seat, wrapped in the blanket from their fort. She's got a fever, he lied, watching Kendra's house through the windshield. I'm keeping her tonight. A fever? She was fine this morning. Kendra's voice had that sharp edge he remembered from family dinners, the tone that made Dell nervous. Kids get sick fast. I'll bring her by tomorrow. James, I need her home. I have work early. Find a babysitter. Silence stretched across the phone line. James counted the seconds. Fine, Kendra said finally. But I want her back first thing in the morning. The line went dead. James drove Mary to his cabin 20 minutes outside Eugene. She stayed quiet during the ride, staring out the window at the dark trees. His place was small, one bedroom, a loft space, and a kitchen that barely qualified as such. But it was his, and it was safe. You can sleep in my bed tonight, he told her as they walked up the porch steps. I'll take the couch. Are you sure? Very sure. Inside, Mary explored while James made her hot chocolate. She touched his books, his survival gear, the framed photo of him and Dell from their last camping trip. In the picture, Dell had his arm around James's shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera. I miss Daddy, Mary said, tracing Dell's face with her finger. Me too. Do you think he's watching? James looked at his niece, really looked at her. She was too thin, too pale, dark circles under her eyes. How had he not noticed before? Because he'd been avoiding them. Avoiding the pain of seeing Dell's family without Dell in it. Yeah, he said quietly. I think he's watching. After Mary fell asleep, James sat at his kitchen table with Dell's old laptop. Kendra had given it to him after the funeral, said Dell would want to have it. James had stuck it in a closet and tried to forget about it. Now he opened every folder, every document. Most of it was normal work files from Dell's job at the power company, photos, music. But in a folder marked legal, James found something that made his blood freeze. Email drafts to a family attorney named Robert Shun, dated 2 weeks before Dell died. Bob, need to discuss emergency custody options for Mary. Situation at home deteriorating rapidly. Evidence of physical and emotional abuse. Can't wait much longer. Call me ASAP. Dell another draft. Never sent. I'm documenting everything. Photos, recordings, medical records. Kendra is hurting our daughter, and I can't stand by anymore. If something happens to me, make sure James gets this laptop. He'll know what to do. Dell. James stared at the screen until the words blurred. Dell had known. He'd been trying to save Mary when he died. The official report said Dell fell down the stairs after drinking. Blood alcohol level just over the legal limit. Accidental death. Case closed, but Dell rarely drank. And he was careful, too careful to fall downstairs he'd walked up thousands of times. James opened another folder marked evidence. Screenshots of text messages. Photos of bruises on Mary's arms and legs. Audio files with names like Kendra_yelling_01 and Mary_closet. His brother had been building a case he'd never got a present. James copied everything to a flash drive, his hands shaking with anger. Then he called his old Army buddy Marcus, now a private investigator in Portland. I need a favor, James said when Marcus answered. And I need it to be off the books. The next morning, Mary woke up screaming. James rushed to the bedroom and found her thrashing in the sheets, eyes wide with terror. The box. I'm sorry. I'll be quiet. Hey. James sat on the bed's edge, hands visible, voice calm. You're safe. You're at Uncle James's house. Mary blinked, focusing on his face. Uncle James. That's right. Bad dream. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I dreamed I was in the box. The dark box. James's jaw tightened. Tell me about the box. It's in the hallway. Mommy puts me there when I'm bad. Sometimes for a long time. Sometimes overnight. How big is this box? Mary held up her hands, indicating something about the size of a large closet. I can't stand up. And it's dark. Really dark. James want to punch something? Instead, he made pancakes while Mary watched cartoons. She ate 3 pancakes and drank 2 glasses of orange juice, more than she'd probably eaten in days. Mary, I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? She nodded, syrup on her chin. You mentioned Dennis yesterday. Tell me about him. Mary's face went serious. He's Mommy's boyfriend. He comes over at night, sometimes. And he touches you. Mary squirmed at her chair. He says it's our special game, that I can't tell anyone or Mommy will get in trouble. Where does he touch you? Mary pointed to her chest, her lap. James felt that cold rage building again. How long has this been happening? Since Christmas, I think. Maybe before. 3 months. For 3 months, this had been happening while James stayed away, while he nursed his grief and avoided his brother's family. What about when your daddy was alive? Did Dennis come around then? Mary shook her head. Daddy didn't like him. They yelled at each other once. Daddy said Dennis wasn't allowed in the house. James pulled out his phone and showed Mary the recording app. Can you tell me everything you just told me again, so I can save it, like Daddy used to do? James froze. Your daddy recorded you talking? Sometimes. When Mommy was mean, he said it was important to remember. James recorded Mary's statement, her small voice clear and steady as she described months of abuse. Then he drove to town for supplies, a GPS tracker small enough to fit in a shoe, a voice-activated recording device that looked like a regular button. This is important, he told Mary as he sewed the tracker into her sneaker. If someone hurts you or scares you, this will help me find you fast. Like a superhero tracker, exactly like that. He showed her the recording button, how to press it when adults weren't looking. But only use this if you feel unsafe, okay? It's our secret. Mary nodded solemnly. Our secret. That afternoon, James drove Mary back to Kendra's house. Every muscle in his body screamed against it, but he needed more evidence. One recording wouldn't be enough for court. He needed patterns, documentation, proof that would hold up under legal scrutiny. Kendra answered the door, looking perfect, blonde hairstyled, makeup flawless, designer jeans that probably cost more than James made in a week. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. How's our patient? She asked, but she was looking at James, not Mary. Better. The fever broke this morning. Good. Kendra's hand landed on Mary's shoulder. James watched his niece flinch. Say thank you to Uncle James, sweetheart. Thank you, Uncle James. Anytime, kiddo. James crouched down to Mary's level. Remember what we talked about? About being safe. Mary nodded. Kendra's grip on her shoulder tightened. We should get inside, Kendra said. Mary has school tomorrow. James stood up slowly. Kendra was tall, maybe 5'8", but he had 6 inches on her. Take care of her. Of course. She's my daughter. But there was something in her voice. Something that sounded like a threat. James drove home planning his next moves. First, he'd visit Mary's school, talk to her teacher. Then he'd dig into Dennis Miles, find out who he was, where he worked, what kind of access he had. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found some interesting stuff about your sister-in-law. Call me. James pulled over and dialed. Your brother's widow is quite a piece of work, Marcus said without preamble. 3 previous marriages, all ended badly. First husband died in a hunting accident, gun went off while he was cleaning it. Second husband had a heart attack at 35, no history of heart problems. Third husband, well, that one just disappeared. Never found the body. Jesus. Gets better. She's got a life insurance policy on your brother. $500,000. And guess who witnessed the will? James already knew the answer. Dennis Miles. Turns out he works part-time for the county administrative consultant for Child Protective Services. Convenient, right? James closed his eyes. How the hell did CPS miss this? They didn't miss it. They buried it. I found 2 formal reports filed by Mary's teacher last year. Both investigations closed within a week. Insufficient evidence. Someone's protecting her. Someone with access to CPS files and the authority to make problems disappear. James thanked Marcus and hung up. Then he sat in his truck on the side of the road, planning how to burn down the system that had failed his niece. He wouldn't just protect Mary, he'd destroy everyone who'd hurt her. Riverside Elementary School sat on 2 acres of playground and portable classrooms, painted cheerful yellow but showing its age. James parked between a minivan covered in soccer stickers and a sedan with a coexist bumper sticker. He'd called ahead, said he was Mary's uncle and needed to discuss her academic progress. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, walked him to Mary's classroom during lunch recess. Through the windows, James could see kids running around the playground. Mary sat alone on a bench, reading a book. Mary's teacher is wonderful, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Very dedicated. She's expressed some concerns about Mary's home situation. What kind of concerns? I'll let Miss Creel explain. Jordana Creel looked younger than James, expected maybe late 20s, with short dark hair and tired eyes. Her classroom walls were covered in student artwork and reading charts. She stood up from her desk when they entered, papers scattered around her like she'd been grading all through lunch. Mr. Van? I'm so glad you came. Mrs. Rodriguez left them alone. Jordana gestured to a small table with adult-sized chairs, the kind used for parent conferences. How well do you know Mary's home situation? Jordana asked. Better than I did a week ago. Not as well as I should. Jordana nodded, like this made perfect sense. Mary's behavior changed drastically after her father died. She used to be outgoing, talkative. Now she's withdrawn, anxious. She flinches when adults move too quickly. Have you reported this? Twice. Jordana's mouth tightened. I filed formal reports with Child Protective Services in September and December. Both times, an investigator came to the school, talked to Mary for about 10 minutes, and closed the case. What did Mary tell them? Nothing. She clammed up completely. Wouldn't say a word. James pulled out his phone. Can I record this conversation? Jordana glanced toward the door, then nodded. Yes. Someone needs to document this. James started recording. Tell me everything you've observed. Mary comes to school hungry most mornings. I keep granola bars on my desk because she's often dizzy during lessons. She's fallen asleep in class multiple times, not normal tiredness, but exhaustion. Like she hasn't slept in days. Jordana stood up and walked to her filing cabinet. She pulled out a folder marked Mary Van Confidential. I've been keeping notes. Probably not legal, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing. She opened the folder, revealing pages of handwritten observations. October 15th. Mary wore long sleeves on an 85-degree day. When she rolled them up during our class, I saw bruises on both forearms. When I asked about them, she said she fell off her bike. She doesn't have a bike. James clenched his fists. What else? October 30th. Mary drew a picture during free time a house with a small figure locked inside a dark space. When I asked about it, she said it was the quiet place where bad girls go. Jordana flipped to another page. November 8th. Mary had a panic attack during a fire drill. Not fear of the alarm panic when I opened the classroom closet to get safety vests. She screamed and hid under her desk. Did you include this in your CPS reports? All of it. Photos of the drawings, detailed descriptions of her behavior, dates and times. The investigator said children often act out after losing a parent. Case closed. Who was the investigator? Jordana flipped through her folder. A woman named Lisa Chun. She seemed rushed, like she wanted to get through the interview as quickly as possible. Did you ever meet Dennis Miles? Mary's mother's boyfriend? He picked her up from school once. Mary didn't want to go with him. She hid in the bathroom until I convinced her it was okay. Jordana's voice dropped. She whispered something to me that day. She said, he plays games I don't like. James stopped recording. Miss Creel, I need to tell you something. But I need to know you'll help me. Help you do what? Save Mary. Jordana didn't hesitate. Whatever you need. James told her about Mary's disclosure, about Dell's hidden files, about Dennis's connection to CPS. Jordana listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail. My God, she whispered. That explains everything. No wonder the investigations went nowhere. I need you to document everything you see from now on. Every bruise, every strange behavior, every time Mary seems scared. Can you do that? Of course. And if anyone from CPS shows up asking questions, call me immediately. Jordana wrote down James's number. What's your plan? Build a case so strong that even Dennis Miles can't bury it. Then burn down everyone who enabled this. That afternoon, James drove to the county offices. Dennis Miles worked in a gray building downtown, in an office that smelled like old coffee and industrial carpet. James waited in the lobby until he saw a tall man in an expensive suit walk through the security door. The man matched Mary's description, mid-40s, dark hair, wedding ring. James followed him to the parking garage. Excuse me, James called out. Dennis Miles? The man turned. He had cold eyes and a politician's smile. Yes, I'm James Van, Mary's uncle. Dennis's smile faltered for just a second. Oh, Mary's mentioned you. I bet she has. James stepped closer. In the army, he'd learned that personal space was a weapon invaded, and people revealed themselves. How long have you been dating Kendra? About 6 months now. She's a wonderful woman. And Mary's a sweet kid. Sweet kid. Right. James studied Dennis's face. No guilt, no nervousness. Just mild annoyance. Where were you the night Dell died? I'm sorry. Simple question. Where were you February 18th? Dennis's face hardened. I don't have to answer that. Who do you think you are? I'm a guy who's going to find out what really happened to my brother. Dennis took a step back, bumping into his car door. Your brother fell downstairs. It was an accident, was it? Dennis fumbled for his car keys. I don't have time for this. If you have questions about Mary's welfare, go through proper channels. What channels would those be? The CPS office where you work. Dennis froze with his key in the lock. That's right, James said quietly. I know who you are. I know what you do. And I know what you've been doing to Mary. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. James pulled out his phone and showed Dennis a photo Mary's drawing of the dark space. 6-year-olds don't usually draw pictures of themselves being locked in closets, unless it's happening to them. Dennis's face went white. He got into his car without another word and drove away fast enough to leave rubber on the concrete. James smiled grimly. He'd rattled him. Scared predators made mistakes. That night, James called Mary while she was supposed to be sleeping. Uncle James. Her voice was barely a whisper. Hey, kiddo. How are you doing? Okay. Mommy's watching TV downstairs. Is Dennis there? Not yet, but he's coming over later. Mommy told me to go to bed early. James's jaw clenched. Remember what I taught you about the button? Press it when I feel scared. That's right. And remember you're not alone, okay? I'm always looking out for you. Okay. Uncle James. Yeah, I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. 3 hours later, James's phone buzzed with an alert. The GPS tracker in Mary's shoe was moving. At 11 p.m., James grabbed his jacket and keys. The tracker showed Mary's location as Riverside Park, 2 miles from Kendra's house. What the hell was a 6-year-old doing at a park at 11 p.m.? He drove there in 8 minutes, parking across the street with his lights off. The park was empty except for one car in the far corner Dennis's sedan. James could see 2 figures on a bench near the playground. Dennis and Mary. James's vision went red. He started to get out of the truck, then forced himself to stop. If he confronted them now, Dennis would lawyer up and Mary would be too scared to testify. He needed evidence. Instead, James took photos with his phone's zoom lens. Dennis sitting too close to Mary, his hand on her leg. Mary's body language hunched over, trying to make herself small. After 20 minutes, they got up and walked back to the car. James followed them home, staying far enough back to avoid detection. He watched Dennis walk Mary to the front door, watched Kendra answer in her bathrobe, watched all 3 of them go inside. The GPS tracker stayed stationary for the rest of the night. The next morning, James called Mary's phone again while she was getting ready for school. How did you sleep? He asked. I didn't. Dennis made me go for a car ride. Where did you go? The park. He said we needed to have a talk about keeping secrets. James closed his eyes. What did he say? That if I told anyone about our games, bad things would happen. That Mommy would get in trouble and have to go away. Then I'd have nobody. Mary, listen to me. No, that is true. If you tell the truth, you'll be safe. Promise? I promise. That afternoon, James drove to a coffee shop in Springfield, 30 minutes south of Eugene. He'd arranged to meet Nico Guerra, a criminal defense attorney Marcus had recommended. Guerra had prosecuted child abuse cases for the state before going into private practice. Guerra was a compact man with silver hair and sharp eyes. He wore a rumpled suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked older than James. Marcus says you have a situation, Guerra said, ordering black coffee and a sandwich. James handed him a flash drive. Everything's on there. Audio recordings, photos, documentation going back months. Guerra plugged the drive into his laptop and put in earbuds. James watched his face change as he listened to Mary's recorded statement. We got to the part about Dennis. Guerra's jaw tightened. How did you get this? Does it matter? For court, yes. For planning our strategy, no. Guerra continued listening. This is solid. The child statement is consistent, detailed, age-appropriate. No leading questions. You did good work. What about Dell's files? Guerra opened another folder, scanning Dell's drafts and photos. Your brother was building a strong case. If he'd lived to file it, but he didn't live. Convenient. You think the mother killed him. I think a lot of people have died around Kendra. And I think Dennis has been covering for her. Guerra leaned back in his chair. What do you want me to do? Get Mary away from them. Permanently. I can file for emergency custody. With this evidence, we'll get a temporary order within 48 hours. But that's just the first step. What's the second step? Criminal charges. Child abuse, child endangerment, conspiracy. Maybe homicide if we can prove your brother was murdered. James pulled out another flash drive. Photos from last night. Dennis took Mary to a park at 11 p.m. Guerra looked at the photos, his face grim. This is good. Very good. Shows ongoing abuse. Demonstrates the immediate danger Mary faces. When do we file? Tomorrow morning. I'll walk the emergency custody petition over to family court myself. What about CPS? Guerra smiled coldly. We don't go to CPS. We go around them. Directly to family court, then to the district attorney. Let CPS explain to a judge why they ignored a teacher's reports while a county employee was enabling child abuse. That evening, James got another alert from Mary's GPS tracker. This time she was at Dennis's house, an expensive place in the hills west of Eugene. James drove up there and parked on the street. Hidden behind a neighbor's hedge, through Dennis's front windows, James could see into the living room. Dennis was showing Mary something on his laptop. Even from a distance, James could see Mary shaking her head, trying to pull away. James took more photos, zoomed in as much as his phone would allow. Then he settled in to wait. At 10 p.m., Dennis and Mary came outside. Dennis was carrying a small duffel bag. Mary looked like she'd been crying. They got into Dennis's car and drove away. James followed, his rage building with every mile. Where the hell was he taking her? They ended up at a motel on Highway 99, a rundown place that rented rooms by the hour. James watched Dennis register for a room while Mary waited in the car. Then Dennis parked in front of room 114. James called 911. I'd like to report a possible child abduction, he said when the dispatcher answered. Adult male has a 6-year-old girl at the Highway 99 motel. Room 114. What's your relationship to the child, sir? I'm her uncle. The adult is not her parent and doesn't have custody. We'll send a unit to check it out. James stayed on the line, parked where he could see the motel room door. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars arrived. James watched the officers knock on the door, saw Dennis answer in his shirt sleeves. One officer went into the room while the other talked to Dennis outside. A few minutes later, the first officer came out with Mary. She was wearing her pajamas, clutching a stuffed animal. James got out of his truck and walked over. I'm her uncle, he told the officer. James Van. Mary saw him and ran. James caught her in a hug as she started crying. Uncle James, you came. Of course I came, sweetheart. The officer, a young woman with kind eyes, knelt down to Mary's level. Honey, can you tell me what happened tonight? Mary looked at James, then back at the officer. Dennis brought me here. He said we were going to play a special game. But I didn't want to play. The officer's face hardened. She looked at her partner, who was handcuffing Dennis near the patrol car. Mr. Van, we're going to need you to come to the station, she said. And we'll need to call Child Protective Services. Don't call CPS, James said quickly. Call family court. I have an emergency custody petition being filed tomorrow morning. The officer looked confused. Sir, that's not how this works. James pulled out Nico Guerra's business card. Call this attorney. He'll explain everything. The custody hearing took place in a sterile courtroom that smelled like disinfectant and old wood. Judge Patricia Lawson presided, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and no patience for nonsense. Kendra sat at the defendant's table with a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Dennis was in county jail, charged with attempted child abuse and unlawful restraint. James sat behind Guerra, Mary beside him, coloring in a notebook. She'd stayed with James for 3 days while CPS scrambled to figure out what happened. 3 days of sleeping through the night, eating regular meals, and acting like a normal 6-year-old. Your Honor, Guerra began, standing up with a folder thick as a phone book. We're requesting emergency custody of Mary Van based on extensive evidence of ongoing physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. The public defender objected. Your Honor, these allegations are unsubstantiated. Ms. Van is a loving mother who's being targeted by a grieving brother-in-law who... Counselor, Judge Lawson interrupted. I'll hear the evidence before I listen to character arguments. Guerra presented everything methodically. Dell's hidden files, showing his intent to seek custody before his death. Mary's recorded statement, her voice small but clear as she described months of abuse. Photos of bruises, timestamps showing their progression. The teacher Jordana Creel testified about her observations, her attempts to get help through proper channels. I filed 2 formal reports with Child Protective Services, she said. Both investigations were closed within a week by investigator Lisa Chun, who stated insufficient evidence. Guerra presented phone records showing extensive communication between Dennis Miles and Lisa Chun, including calls made after each CPS report. Your Honor, Guerra said, Mr. Miles worked as an administrative consultant for Child Protective Services. He had access to case files, investigation schedules, and the authority to influence outcomes. Judge Lawson studied the evidence for a long time. The courtroom was silent, except for Mary's crayons scratching across paper. Ms. Van, the judge said finally, do you have anything to say in your defense? Kendra stood up, her lawyer trying to pull her back down. This is all lies. James has always hated me. He's using my daughter to get revenge. Revenge for what? For Dell's death. He blames me for the accident. Guerra stood up. Your Honor, if I may, we have additional evidence regarding Dell Van's death. The public defender objected again, but Judge Lawson waved him off. I'll allow it. Guerra played Dell's hidden voice memo, his brother's voice filling the courtroom. If you're hearing this, it's because Kendra killed me. She pushed me. I told her I was taking Mary. I didn't fall. She shoved me. And she said, now neither of you gets her. Kendra went white. That's fake. He was drunk when he made that. The recording is time-stamped 2 days before Dell's death, Guerra said. At 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Hardly drunk. Judge Lawson looked at the public defender. Do you have any evidence to counter this? The public defender shuffled through his papers helplessly. Your Honor, we weren't prepared for these additional allegations. I bet you weren't. Judge Lawson closed the file in front of her. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting emergency custody of Mary Van to her uncle, James Van, effective immediately. I'm also ordering a full investigation into Dell Van's death and the handling of previous CPS reports. She looked directly at Kendra. Ma'am, you're fortunate this is family court and not criminal court, though I suspect that may change soon. Outside the courthouse, James knelt down to Mary's level. How do you feel, kiddo? Safe, she said simply. That evening, James got a call from Marcus in Portland. You should turn on Channel 12. James switched on the news. A reporter stood outside the county building, microphone in hand. Tonight, at 6, a shocking case of child abuse and corruption in Eugene. How did Child Protective Services ignore multiple reports while a county employee allegedly enabled the abuse of a 6-year-old girl? The story ran for 12 minutes. Photos of Dennis being arrested. Interviews with Jordana Creel about her failed CPS reports. A former CPS worker speaking anonymously about pressure to close cases quickly. James's phone started ringing. Other news stations, reporters, even a producer from a true crime podcast called Justice Delayed. James answered that one. Mr. Van, this is Sarah Kim from Justice Delayed. We'd like to feature Mary's story on our show. Bring attention to how the system failed her. What would that involve? An interview with you, maybe the teacher who reported the abuse. We protect Mary's identity, of course, but her story could help other children. James thought about all the kids like Mary, trapped in situations where the people meant to protect them were the ones causing harm. Send me the details, he said. 2 weeks after the custody hearing, James was cleaning out Dell's old laptop when he found something that stopped him cold. Hidden in a system folder, buried deep in temporary files, was an audio recording labeled insurance. James clicked on it. Dell's voice filled the room, but this wasn't the recording they played in court. This was different, longer, more detailed. It's March 5th, 2024. If anyone finds this, it means Kendra killed me like I think she's going to. I've been documenting everything, the abuse, the threats, Dennis Miles helping her cover it up. But there's more. Dell's voice was shaky, like he was scared. I found out about her other husbands. Marcus helped me dig up the records. 3 men, all dead under suspicious circumstances. All had life insurance policies with Kendra as the beneficiary. All died right around the time they figured out who she really was. James paused the recording, his heart pounding. This was bigger than child abuse. This was serial murder. Her first husband, David Chun, yes, the investigator Lisa Chun, is his sister. Kendra has been manipulating that whole family for years. David supposedly shot himself while cleaning his hunting rifle. Except David was left-handed, and the trajectory of the bullet was wrong for a self-inflicted wound. I have the autopsy photos. James opened another hidden folder on the laptop. Crime scene photos, autopsy reports, insurance documents. Dell had been thorough. Her second husband, Michael Torres, heart attack at 35. Except the toxicology report shows traces of digitalis in his system. Not enough to kill him outright, but enough to trigger cardiac arrest in someone with no history of heart problems. Digitalis comes from foxglove plants. Guess what Kendra grows in her garden? The recording continued for 20 more minutes. Dell laying out a pattern of murder spanning 8 years. Each husband had figured out what Kendra was: a predator who targeted vulnerable men, married them, collected insurance money, then moved on. I confronted her about it last night, showed her the evidence. She didn't deny it. She laughed, said I'd never be able to prove anything because she had friends in law enforcement. Friends like Dennis Miles and Lisa Chun. Dell's voice got quieter. She told me if I tried to leave with Mary, I'd end up like the others. But I can't leave Mary with her. She's already started touching her, making her do things. If I die, James needs to know the truth. He needs to protect Mary, and he needs to stop Kendra before she kills again. The recording ended. James sat in his kitchen, staring at the laptop screen. His brother hadn't just been trying to save Mary from abuse. He'd been trying to expose a serial killer. James called Guerra immediately. I need you to come to my house, now, and bring a notary. Guerra arrived within an hour, along with a notary public and Marcus, who'd driven down from Portland. Play it, Guerra said. They listened to the entire recording while the notary documented its authenticity. When it finished, Guerra sat back in his chair. This changes everything. We're not just talking about child abuse anymore. We're talking about multiple homicides. Can we use this in court? It's admissible as a dying declaration, a statement made by someone who believed their death was imminent. Very powerful in court. Marcus opened his laptop. I've been digging deeper into Kendra's background. Want to see what else I found? He showed them marriage certificates, death certificates, insurance payouts. A clear pattern stretching back 12 years. She's collected over $2 million in life insurance, Marcus said. And there's more. I found evidence she's been scouting her next target, a widower in Salem with a substantial pension. We need to stop her, James said. We need to call the police, Guerra corrected. This is a homicide investigation now. James shook his head. The police haven't done anything so far. Half of them are probably in her pocket. James! No, we do this ourselves. We gather everything, present it as one complete case, and make it impossible for anyone to ignore or bury. Guerra, consider this. What did you have in mind? Public pressure. Make this so big that even corrupt cops can't sweep it under the rug. That night, James called the producer from Justice Delayed. Sarah? It's James Van. I want to do that interview, but I want to do it live. Live? That's unusual for our format. This story is about to break wide open. If you want to be first, we do it live tomorrow night. Why aren't you telling me that a serial killer has been operating in Oregon for over a decade, and the system has been covering for her? Silence on the line. I'll call you back in an hour, Sarah said. The Justice Delayed podcast normally recorded in a studio in Seattle, but but Sarah Kim drove to Eugene to conduct the interview in person. She brought a full production crew and enough equipment to broadcast live to their 2.3 million subscribers. They set up in the community center downtown, the same building where James taught wilderness survival classes. Appropriate, he thought. He'd been teaching people to survive in the woods for years. Now he was teaching them to survive predators in plain sight. Mary stayed with Jordana Creel during the recording. She'd been through enough. She didn't need to relive her trauma for public consumption. The interview started at 7 p.m. Pacific Time. Tonight on Justice Delayed Live, Sarah began, we're investigating a case that involves child abuse, murder, and corruption at the highest levels of Oregon's child protection system. With me is James Van, whose 6-year-old niece was failed by every system meant to protect her. For the first hour, James told Mary's story. The abuse, the failed CPS investigations, Dennis Miles's role in covering everything up. Sarah was a skilled interviewer, asking exactly the right questions to let James present the evidence methodically. But there's more to this story, James said as they reached the end of the hour. My brother Dell wasn't just trying to save his daughter from abuse. He was trying to expose a serial killer. Sarah's eyes widened. They discussed this beforehand, but hearing it live was different. James played excerpt from Dell's final recording, his brother's voice carrying clearly through the audio system. The chat feed on the podcast website exploded, thousands of comments pouring in as listeners reacted to the revelation. Marcus joined the interview via video link from Portland, presenting his research on Kendra's previous marriages. The pattern of death and insurance payouts, the suspicious circumstances, the convenient accidents. What we have here, Marcus said, is a black widow who's been operating for over a decade. She targets vulnerable men, marries them, collects life insurance, and moves on. And she's been protected by a network of corrupt officials. By the end of the 2-hour broadcast, #JusticeForMary was trending on social media. The Oregon State Police issued a statement saying they were reviewing the evidence. The governor's office announced an investigation into CPS procedures. James's phone rang as soon as the broadcast ended. Mr. Van? This is Detective Rebecca Santos with OSP. We need to talk. Detective Santos met James at the community center an hour after the broadcast ended. She was a compact woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes, the kind of cop who missed nothing. That was quite a show, she said, settling into a folding chair. How much of it was true? James handed her a flash drive. All of it. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence we discussed tonight. Santos plugged the drive into her laptop. While she reviewed the files, James told her about the network of corruption, about Dennis Miles and Lisa Chun, about the CPS cases that got buried. Why didn't you come to us first? Santos asked. Because I don't know who I can trust. How do I know you're not part of their network? Santos nodded like this made perfect sense. Fair enough. Here's what's going to happen. I'm driving to Salem tonight to wake up the district attorney. Tomorrow morning, we're arresting everyone involved, including Kendra, especially Kendra. The arrest started at dawn. James watched the news coverage from his cabin, Mary curled up beside him on the couch. Dennis Miles was led out of his house in handcuffs, charged with conspiracy to commit child abuse, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. Lisa Chun was arrested at her CPS office, charged with evidence tampering and official misconduct, but the big arrest came at noon. Television crews followed the police convoy to Kendra's house. James turned up the volume as the reporter described the scene. Kendra Van is being arrested on charges of first-degree murder in the death of her husband Del Van, as well as charges related to the abuse of her 6-year-old daughter. Police are also investigating her connection to the deaths of 3 previous husbands. The camera showed Kendra being led away in handcuffs, no longer the perfectly groomed woman who'd fooled everyone for so long. Her hair was messy, her makeup smeared from crying. As they put her in the police car, she looked directly at the camera and screamed, "He was going to take her. I couldn't let him win." James rewound the footage and played it again. There was a confession on live television. Mary looked up at him. "Is it over, Uncle James?" "Yeah, kiddo. It's over." But it wasn't. Not quite. The trial lasted 3 weeks. James attended every day, sitting in the front row where Kendra could see him. He wanted her to know he was there, that he'd never stop fighting for Mary, that he'd never forgive what she'd done to his family. Guerra had taken the case pro bono, determined to see justice done. The evidence was overwhelming: Dell's recordings, Mary's testimony, given in closed session with a child advocate, the pattern of suspicious deaths, the insurance payouts. The prosecution played Dell's final recording for the jury. When they heard his voice saying, "Kendra killed me," several jurors wiped away tears on the witness stand. Kendra tried to play the victim. She claimed Dell was abusive, that she'd acted in self-defense. She said Mary was confused, that a 6-year-old couldn't be trusted to tell the truth about complex adult situations. The jury didn't buy it. Dennis Miles testified for the prosecution, having cut a deal for a reduced sentence. He described how he'd met Kendra through an online dating site, how she'd gradually revealed her plan to collect insurance money from Dell's death. "She told me Dell was getting suspicious," Dennis testified. "She said she needed him gone before he could file for custody. She asked me to make sure any CPS reports got buried." "And you agreed?" "Yes." She said if I helped her, we'd split the insurance money. Lisa Chen also testified for the prosecution. Through tears, she admitted to suppressing CPS investigations, to destroying evidence, to protecting the woman who'd killed her brother years earlier. "I thought if I helped her, she'd tell me what really happened to David," Lisa said. "Instead, she just used me." The most powerful testimony came from Mary herself, though the jury never saw her. Her recorded statement was played in court, her small voice describing months of abuse, while Kendra sat 10 feet away. When the prosecutor asked if Kendra had ever threatened her about telling the truth, Mary's recorded voice was clear. She said, "I'd end up like Daddy if I talked." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, child abuse, child endangerment, insurance fraud. Judge Lawson sentenced Kendra to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As they led her away, Kendra turned to look at James one last time. Her face was twisted with rage. "This isn't over," she said. James stood up. "Yes, it is." 6 months later, James was officially awarded permanent custody of Mary. The adoption paperwork was finalized on a Tuesday morning in the same courthouse where Kendra had been sentenced. Mary chose to keep her last name Van. "Because Daddy would want me to," she said. They celebrated with ice cream and a trip to the bookstore. Mary picked out 3 books about dinosaurs and one about brave princesses who save themselves. That evening, a reporter from the local news station called. They wanted to do a follow-up story 6 months after Kendra's conviction. "What would you say to Kendra if you could talk to her today?" the reporter asked during the interview. James didn't hesitate. "Nothing. She had the right to remain silent. She should have used it." The reporter pressed for more. "Do you forgive her for what she did to your family?" "No," James said flatly. "Forgiveness is earned. She destroyed lives, hurt a child, killed my brother. There's no forgiveness for that." "What about redemption? The possibility of change?" James looked at the camera. "Some people can't be redeemed. Some people are just broken. My job isn't to fix her. My job is to protect Mary and make sure nothing like this happens again." After the interview, James drove home to his cabin. Mary was in the living room, building a fort out of couch cushions. She looked up when he came in. "Uncle James, want to help?" "Always." They built the fort together, making it strong and secure. Mary crawled inside first, arranging her stuffed animals in a circle. "This is safe," she said, just like she had that first night. "Very safe," James agreed. Later that evening, after Mary was asleep, James sat on his porch looking out at the dark forest. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Kendra's appeals were denied. "She'll die in prison." James deleted the message without replying. He didn't need updates on Kendra's life. She was gone, locked away where she could never hurt another child. In the distance, an owl called to its mate. Night sounds filled the forest, familiar, predictable, safe. James had learned something important over the past year. Justice wasn't about forgiveness or redemption. Justice was about protection. It was about making sure the innocent stayed safe and the guilty paid for their crimes, that he'd protected Mary. He'd exposed the system that failed her. He made sure Kendra would never hurt anyone again. That was enough. Inside the house, Mary slept peacefully in her own bed, in her own room, with the closet door wide open. Not because she was scared of the dark, but because she wasn't afraid anymore. She had Uncle James watching over her. And Uncle James never forgot, never forgave, and never let his guard down. Some people called it holding a grudge. James called it keeping his family safe.